Fala galera do Hipnose na Prática, voltamos aqui com mais uma entrevista com um grande mestre. Na verdade, ele é um mestre e filho de um dos maiores mestres do mundo da hipnose. É isso mesmo, ele é filho do Larry Elman. Larry, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And thank everybody for the fact that we're having a very pleasant time in Brazil. Beautiful country, very friendly. Thank you.
Thank you. Nós estamos aqui junto com o Michael Arruda, que está trazendo os melhores. Ele se preocupa muito, junto com nós do Hipnose na Prática, trazer os melhores conteúdos de hipnose do mundo. Por isso que nós trouxemos aqui, nada mais nada menos, como o filho do Larry Elman. Nós vamos começar entendendo como é que foi a infância dele. Porque talvez você tenha filhos também. Como é que será essa visão, né? De ser o filho de um hipnotizador, o melhor hipnotizador do mundo, um dos melhores. Larry, como foi ser filho do Larry Elman?
Well, being my father's son was interesting. From my youngest memories, my father was an important person, not just to the family, but he was very famous in radio broadcasting and certain defense work. So by the time I was a junior high school kid, I'd grown up with knowing my father was famous. Then he started teaching hypnosis, and the same process occurred of suddenly I'm the son of somebody very famous. About that time, I went to my father and asked to take his course. He walked me over to his bookcase, took out a book, and told me, read this cover to cover and give me a written book report on it. Well, you know what a 10-year-old is going to say when that happens. Oh, Dad! But I read it. I did what he said. I brought it back. He looked at it, put it back on the shelf, picked another book, and said, Larry, you're lucky. In this book, only chapters 2, 3, and 5. So I did that. I must have gone through about a half a dozen books. And finally I said to Dad, why? He said, if you are going to take my course in medical hypnosis, you will be the only person in the room who has not graduated from both college and medical school. And I will not have you so uneducated as to embarrass me. And I went in. I was one of the students. And so I have a lot of memories of my father being the teacher, being both a very loving and gentle teacher, but at the same time a very demanding teacher. You can be both at the same time. It takes a certain amount of art. Too many people go to one side or the other, but Dad did both. Tough teacher, but gentle and supportive.
E Larry, como foi a primeira vez que você hipnotizou? Como é que foi? Deu tudo certo? Como é que foi? Conta pra gente como é que foi.
Well, the very first time that I ever hypnotized somebody was in my father's class. I remember being very nervous. I remember being very doubtful that I would succeed at all, and very thrilled when the person went into trance. And after that, it's sort of a blur. I mean, in my father's class, you practiced regularly. And so there would be dozens of times when you would do this. And you were given homework. You were expected to do a certain number of inductions in the time between the first and second class. And on these inductions, you were supposed to do various procedures so that you were exposed to how to do it. Well, about the second week of the course, my father came to me and said, Larry, you're not doing your homework. What do you mean, Dad? Well, you're supposed to do such and such number of inductions, and you haven't done that. And I said, well, Dad, all the doctors have a steady flow of patients coming through their practice. I don't. So I don't have anybody to practice on. He said, go out and be a stage hypnotist. I said, I don't know how. He said, you've had some training in hypnosis? Figure it out. Go be a stage hypnotist. And I'm looking very scared, and he says, you can even use my vaudeville billing title, which was the world's youngest and fastest hypnotist. So I went out and did that. Now, the world's youngest hypnotist, when you're only 11 years old, you don't have much competition for it. The world's fastest, using my father's methods, you can get basic trance in 3 to 10 seconds. Instant inductions hadn't been invented yet. So fastest was true. But teaching myself stage hypnosis, I always told my wife, I hold the title as the world's worst stage hypnotist because I've got the bragging rights that I've done it, but I'm not good at it. Then one night, she and I went to have dinner at a meeting of the Chamber of Commerce, and their entertainment was a stage hypnotist. And I leaned over and said, "Honey, he's taken my title. I am now only the world's second worst stage hypnotist."
Uma coisa que acontece muito com os hipnotistas aqui é tratar com pessoas resistentes, que resistem à hipnose. Como é que você lida com isso?
Most people who do not go into hypnosis easily have a fear or a misunderstanding. When you are preparing them to go into hypnosis, you should brief them on what it's going to be like and any fear they might have that you can figure out and guess that's what they're afraid of, you explain away. You still may find that it doesn't always work. By the time, when you first start, if you're using my father's techniques, you probably will see 70-75% of everybody that you attempt to hypnotize will go in easily. The other 25% will be in this fear category. By the time you've been doing it for a couple of months, the numbers will be about 95 versus 5 because you'll have learned how to sense what it is that's bothering somebody and include that in your pre-talk. If that doesn't work, give the person a suggestibility test. Prove to them that they are suggestible. One good one is having them lock their fingers together like this and hold 2 fingers up. And you tell them to stare at those fingers. And the fingers are magnets and they will come together. They keep staring, the fingers will touch, and they'll say, "What happened to me?" And you say, "Well, that's how simple hypnosis is. Shall we try it again?" And at that point, they know and believe you've relieved their fears. They will go right in.
Muito bom mesmo.
By the way, that was one suggestibility test. There are dozens. It's just that that's the easiest one to explain in an interview. Another thing to remember is that hypnosis is a consent state. They will not go into hypnosis unless they want to. One of the fears they have is them not being in control. So you tell them, in hypnosis, you are in control. I am only guiding you. And if you want to take care of, and then you name whatever problem they came in for, smoking, weight, problems in school, whatever it is, if you really want to help yourself with that, decide that you want this, and it will happen. Among the things I've named, the one that I've probably had the most success with has been school, because for college I went to MIT, and at MIT I was constantly helping people with fears of final exams. So it was a common thing, and just letting them know this will help you if you want to be helped. And that has a great deal of effect on what they want, so that if they want to be helped, they immediately become more cooperative isn't an adequate word, more desirous of hypnosis.
Larry, e conta um caso que foi intrigante para você, que marcou a sua vida no caso de terapia. Porque o Dave Elman era conhecido com as terapias muito rápidas. E como foi para você? Já teve alguma terapia que marcou a sua vida?
Well, I can tell you of two incidents that I'm fairly proud of. First, when I was at MIT, I fairly often would help a classmate who was afraid of an exam or a final exam. And I did this often enough so I didn't even remember who I helped and who I didn't, because they were simply classmates who needed help on this, and it was easy. Cheryl and I were at the 50th reunion of my graduating class, 50 years after we graduated. And we're at a cocktail party, and I'm talking with some friends over here, and she's at the other end of the room, and she starts calling out loudly for me to come over and join her group. So I do, and she turns to a man who had been very, very close to me all during my 4 years at MIT, and she says, "Tell Larry what you just told me." And the man says, "Larry, I would not have graduated if it weren't for you." And I looked at him in surprise, and I said, "You always had a higher grade average. You always understood the profs better. You always had a better grasp of engineering than I. How can you say that?" He says, "Don't you remember how scared I was of finals and how you got me through them?" And I hadn't remembered because I had done so many of them. But this is my closest friend. I can't say, "No, I don't remember." I can't do that. So I said, "Oh, yeah, fine." We get up to our hotel room hours later, and Cheryl says, "You didn't remember, did you?" And I didn't. So then another one where I remember some of it, but not all of it. I went to a dietitian. I was heavily overweight. I'm still heavier than I should be. With her, I lost 82 pounds. That's roughly 40 kilos. A lot of weight. And she did such a good job on helping me lose weight that she was at our wedding. At any rate, my first time in her office, I'm waiting while the previous client finishes with her. I'm in her office, and I'm waiting for the previous client to be finished, and I start reading the wall on which she has her college degrees and her licenses and things. And I happened to be reading where she had studied with Jerry Kine, who is an excellent, probably the best hypnotist in the world. And it is a degree in Dave Elman's studies, which is one of the things that he does and does very well. So I'm standing there reading it, and she comes up behind me and she says, "Do you know who Dave Elman is?" And before I can answer, she goes, "Wait a minute, same last name, are you related?" And I said, "I'm his son and I'm a hypnotist." And she looks totally shocked. And that was the start of getting me through my diet. But then a week or so later, she says, "You have to bring your spouse." I said, "I'm not married." "You have to bring your fiancé." "I'm not engaged." "Is there a lady that you have dinner with many days of the week?" I said, "Yes, my girlfriend and I have dinner together almost every day of the week." "You must bring her, because I have to have a lady who can see that you follow my instructions and eat properly." So Cheryl comes along, and we get partway through the session, and the dietitian whispers something to me, and I say to Cheryl, "Would you mind stepping out into the waiting room for a few moments?" And she does, and the lady says, "Would you mind hypnotizing me?" The dietitian had had an injury. I don't remember the circumstances. She had been, prior to the injury, a award-winning ballroom dancer, the classical, the waltz and the classical dances. And then she had to stop while she healed from the injury, and now she was going back into a major competition and her self-confidence was down. Will I dance as well after the injury? So I hypnotized her and gave her a self-confidence treatment, and then we went on with the dietitian stuff, and as we were leaving, Cheryl asked what had happened, and I told her. And the last time I spoke with her, she had many trophies. They're her trophies. She won them. She's good. All I did was relieve her anxiety. But relieving anxiety will help people. It's one of the major things a good hypnotist does. It sounds minor, but to the person it's very, very personal. That obvious that you're doing a lot of convincing. Let the suggestions be their own convincer. If you do it right, every test you give is a combination of three things. It convinces them, it lets you see that they are truly at the point where you think they are, how deep are they, or whatever, and it always ends with another deepener. Because the deeper that they are in trance, the better post-hypnotic suggestions will take. So if every convincer ends with a deepener, they will leave the office knowing they were hypnotized, and the suggestions you've made will work very, very strongly.
Para a gente finalizar, Larry, eu gostaria que você indicasse um livro para quem quer conhecer mais os conhecimentos do Larry Elman. Qual livro seria?
Well, probably the best reference, in my opinion, is my father's book, Hypnotherapy, Dave Elman's Hypnotherapy. The thing that makes it so good is that my father tries to keep it simple and tries to look at it from the viewpoint not just of telling you to do such and such, but explaining why you would do that. Now, many people, because it was written for physicians, will say it's a medical book. No, it's a hypnosis book, but because at that time everybody reading it was a doctor, it uses medical cases as its examples. But let me ask you something. Does it matter whether I'm using hypnosis to ease pain of a broken bone or whether I'm using it to help somebody with grief? They are both a form of pain, and they both will respond to hypnosis trying to make the person able to handle them. So the result is you can take that and learn quite a bit from it. Now, it's a superb book. It's my primary reference. But if you ask me, is there a second book, I wrote a very, very small addendum or appendix or helper to it, the blueprint of the Dave Elman induction. And it's a very small book, but a lot of people who have read it says that it helped to add livelihood or make more human the longer book. Not because Dad wasn't good, but because Dad was dealing with a very high-level audience with a lot of material. I was aiming for a lower audience and being brief, so it's a good supplement. Those are the two that I would recommend.
Larry, eu quero agradecer você, muito obrigado por essa grande entrevista, eu aposto que o pessoal que está assistindo está muito agradecido pelas suas dicas. Quero agradecer também a Cher, espero que vocês possam vir mais vezes ao Brasil, porque vocês são sempre muito bem-vindos, vocês têm um grande conhecimento e muito a ensinar ainda aos hipnotistas do Brasil ainda. Muito obrigado mesmo.
Thank you very, very much. We're enjoying our time in Brazil. We hope and expect to be back. We teach a course called Best Practices of Dave Elman, and it's aimed at the practicing hypnotist because it always provides additional information to what you've had in other trainings. Note that here in Brazil you have a number of very, very good instructors. My very good friend Michael Arruda is an Omni instructor, which means he was trained by and uses Jerry Kine's methods, which are descended from Dave Elman's methods. And so take whatever training you can get in hypnosis, and when we get back to Brazil, come join us. We would love to meet more Brazilians. We've met a stupendous number of very wonderful people here, and we've enjoyed every moment we've been in Brazil, and we look forward to coming back. And thank you very, very much.
Agora fala pro pessoal, tchau, tchau, hipnose na prática.
Tchau, tchau, hipnose na prática.
Muito bom. É isso aí, galera. Hipnose na prática, trazendo os melhores do mundo pra você. Tchau, tchau.